knocking him out, kicks and knees and elbows. I'm not going to do what Charles did and come out and have a boxing match with him, because I know he's a very good boxer. I respect his hands, I respect him as a fighter, he's very good, but once I get on top of him, I think stylistically Arman's a tougher fight than Ilia. He's more of a proper lightweight. I think he's got better grappling than Ilia, but I obviously want Ilia. I want to fight for a world title, I want to be the UFC world champion. I deserve it more than Arman. He hasn't fought for 18 months? Since he last fought, I've got 2 finishes. I want to fight Ilia whenever, wherever. I'd love to come to Bernabeu and punch your face in. Do it in Spain, in front of your fake countrymen, because you're really German.
They always used to say it, like, he's smaller, he's this, he's that, and it's not always about the size, it's about the skills.
Yeah.
I don't feel smaller in the lightweight division at all. I feel very comfortable, and
yeah,
I prove it. Maybe they are taller though, but not big.
In my opinion, I think Paddy's the fight to make. Pay-per-view wise, you're the champ too, so you want the biggest fight, right?
Yeah, but it's not always.
It's not always
under my control.
Arman Tsarukyan didn't hold back when he was asked whether Paddy Pimblett could beat Ilia Topuria. He made it clear that there's absolutely no chance.
Do you think Paddy can beat Ilia?
No, just me can beat Ilia. That's all for now in our division.
You're the only one.
Right now, yes. And everybody knows that. Even UFC knows that. That's why they're trying to push him as much as possible. If I go and perform very well and finish Hooker, they cannot avoid me anymore.
The confident lightweight contender, currently sitting at number 1 in the UFC rankings, believes he's the only man alive who can take the belt away from Topuria. Tsarukyan's self-belief isn't surprising considering the roller coaster year he's had. After being forced to withdraw from a scheduled title fight with Islam Makhachev just a day before UFC 311 due to a back injury, he's determined to remind everyone why he's still the biggest threat in the division. Now, he's preparing to face Dan Hooker in the main event of UFC Qatar on November 22nd, a fight he sees as his ticket back to a title shot. In his eyes, once he gets past Hooker, the UFC will have no choice but to give him the opportunity he deserves. He's convinced the organization knows how dangerous he is and that they've been deliberately keeping him away from Topuria because of it.
Why November 22nd? Why Qatar? Why Dan Hooker? How did we end up here?
They said this year Ilia is not gonna fight, so I said I'll fight with anybody because I haven't fought long time. Dan Hooker, Gagey, or works for me. Finally, I heard Gagey said no, and Hooker said yes, so we are in.
While Tsarukyan is laser focused on his upcoming fight, others in the MMA world have been busy discussing the rapidly developing story surrounding Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett. The hype around a possible clash between the new lightweight king and the charismatic Liverpudlian has taken over headlines ever since the pair came face-to-face in the octagon following Topuria's brutal knockout win over Charles Oliveira at UFC 317. The undefeated Spaniard, who captured the vacant lightweight title that night, has openly expressed interest in facing Pimblett next, something that has sparked both excitement and controversy across the MMA community.
As a guy who spent time in the cage with Paddy, what kind of a chance do you give Paddy if he gets that Ilia Topuria fight?
Paddy is better than most will give him credit for. His octagon presence was on point. He knew where he needed to be. He was completely okay with getting taken down that first round. He kept great distance, kept me off with the kick. Topuria being a little bit shorter than me, but great punching power. I think Paddy would have a good chance to keep it past a round or two because he's not going to engage as much as Oliveira did. But ultimately, it's definitely a mismatch. And that's just because we're talking Ilia Topuria. I think Ilia Topuria is easily the most talented guy, not just in our division, but I think in the entire sport.
Demetrius Johnson has been vocal about his thoughts on the situation. He doesn't necessarily hate the idea of Topuria fighting Pimblett, but he questions the fairness behind it. Johnson pointed out that Tsarukyan is clearly the rightful number 1 contender, yet the UFC seems more interested in booking fights based on entertainment value rather than ranking order. For Johnson, this is another sign that the sport has turned into a spectacle driven more by business than merit. He feels that Tsarukyan, not Pimblett, should be next in line for Topuria since rankings are supposed to mean something. Otherwise, he argues there is no point in having them at all.
For Ilia Topuria. Now, technically, it should be Arman Tsarukyan because he is truly the number 1 contender. But they basically forced this Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria engagement because there is beef between those guys. They have had some exchanges before outside of the octagon. But this is where I had this hot take recently this week is that I said the UFC is not a sport. Like, they get to dictate what they want to push the narrative of what the fans want to see, which that's not what a sport is dictated on. And it's funny because my dad and my wife, Destiny, were watching the fights, Like, what the fuck? It's like WWE all over again. Yeah, and Michael was going off. He goes, why are they giving us Paddy Pimblett? It should be Arman Shrukin. And truthfully, it should be. The next contender for Ilia Topuria should be Arman Shrukin, because he was the number one contender, and he was also the backup fighter for this fight who showed up, made weight, was ready to go. He looked like he was in shape, and he had no injuries going into this fight. But now, I bet you they're probably going to go Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria, which, I'm not mad about that, but I want people to start earning their truthful spot of what's the whole point of having rankings when they're not going to abide by the number one contender. Like, let's just get rid of all the rankings and let's just do a poll of like what the fans want to see, and let's just run the event like that. Let's just do that. But other than
It's not hard to see why Johnson feels that way. Paddy Pimblett is currently ranked 8th in the lightweight division despite a big win over Michael Chandler earlier this year at UFC 314. Meanwhile, Sarukian, sitting at number 1, has already beaten former champion Charles Oliveira, the same man Topuria knocked out to claim the belt. The math is simple, but the UFC's priorities seem to be leaning toward what's best for pay-per-view sales rather than sporting integrity.
Ilia Topuria versus Paddy is one of the truest grudges that we have in our sport right now. Some of you might not have known about it, and the rest of you might have forgot about it. But that B-roll and footage exists every bit as much as Masvidal and Leon exist. Ilia and Paddy exist. But how do we get there? One thing that Paddy said about his career, he said, fight Gaethje and then I'll go deal with Charles. But he had a different idea if Ilia won. If Ilia wins and that's the big grudge match, move Gaethje out of the side. He's ready for the title right now.
Dustin Poirier, who recently announced his retirement after a hard-fought loss to Max Holloway, also shared his opinion on the matter. The former interim lightweight champion doesn't believe Pimblett should be fighting for the title yet. He respects the British fighter's rise, but feels that a single win over a struggling Michael Chandler doesn't warrant a title opportunity. In Poirier's eyes, Paddy Pimblett should first take on another top 5 opponent to truly test himself before stepping into the cage with a monster like Ilia Topuria. Interestingly, Poirier floated an unexpected idea. He'd rather see Pimblett face Max Holloway next. He thinks that would be the perfect matchup to reveal where Pimblett truly stands skill-wise. Holloway, who has spent most of his career at featherweight, has proven time and time again that he can hang with the best.
If we're getting an Ilia fight in January, say, and it is either Gaethje or Paddy Pimblett, which fight would you rather see?
Gaethje.
Yeah. Do you think
Gaethje.
that's a harder fight for Ilia?
Man, he's such a precise striker and his timing's so good. And Gaethje, like I said before, puts himself in harm's way. It could be a horrible matchup for Gaethje, if he lunges in and gets sniped at one of those clean shots. But also it could be a tough fight, on the other side. It's tough, man. Playing matchmaker and how the fights go in my head, it's tough. Anything could happen in there. But here's one thing I'm sure of, respect to Paddy and everything he's done. I don't think a win over Michael Chandler, on the streak that Chandler's on, the way his fights have been going, deserves a title shot right away. I know he's exciting and people are talking about him, but I would like to see him fight one more top 5 guy, one more tough test, and then we could talk about title fights for him. I think it's a little bit rushed for Paddy, if we're talking about him and Ilia. If I was a matchmaker, it would be Arman versus Gaethje. Winner of that gets title fight. Hooker versus Paddy. Winner of that's next in line. That's the way I would have laid it out.
Speaking of Hooker, he's made his own feelings known about the UFC even entertaining the idea of Topuria versus Pimblett. The New Zealand striker was brutally honest about his thoughts. He believes that if Pimblett gets a title shot after beating Chandler, it would be a joke. Hooker pointed out that if he were in Topuria's position, he'd probably choose Pimblett too, not because he's the toughest challenge, but because it's the easiest path to a big payday. From a business perspective, it's the logical choice, but from a sporting one, it's completely unfair.
They might actually do Paddy, which is like an absolute piss take. If you're in Ilia's shoes, logically he should be fighting Arman, but he's not going to because Arman's really tough fighter. But if you're smart, you take Paddy Pimblett. You're going to get the most money because there's a lot of animosity and the worst fighter. So it's like a win-win situation for Ilia Topuria.
Former lightweight contender Ilia Kenta echoed similar thoughts, expressing frustration at what he sees as Pimblett getting special special treatment. He pointed out that Pimblett's 7-fight unbeaten streak in the UFC might look impressive on paper, but most of his opponents have been past their prime or on losing streaks. Akenta even noted that Pimblett's last 3 opponents, Chandler, Bobby Green, and Tony Ferguson, have a combined skid of double-digit losses, which doesn't exactly scream title contention. Despite criticizing Pimblett's matchmaking, Akenta admitted that the bad blood between him and Topuria could easily tempt the UFC into making the fight anyway. The company has always favored storylines that sell, and this feud has been brewing for years. From social media insults to a hotel scuffle in London back in 2022, their rivalry is everything a promoter could dream of.
I hope they don't give it to Paddy. They can't give it to Paddy. I think Gaethje
Why
and
not?
him, I don't think he's fought the caliber of guys. You know, I think they've definitely given him like the favorable matchups. Like, I think the last 3 opponents he's on are on like an 0-10 losing streak. You know what I mean? Like, you got before
like 0-13, 0-12 or something like that.
Yeah. You know, but there is the bad blood. You know what I mean? They got that bad blood goes a long way in selling pay-per-views, and at the end of the day, that's what that's all the UFC really cares about. It's not about who's rightfully deserving of it, but more who can sell the more pay-per-views, and Paddy might be the guy. And you know what I mean? It's kind of like you kind of skip the line, you go right to the title shot, you might be able to get it done. You know, I think a lot of the tough fights are the ones like, you know, the quarters and the semifinals leading up into the final, the match. And I feel like he kind of like skipped those because he fought guys that are kind of like on the way out, a little losing streaky and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's Arman probably should be the most deserving. You know, he was there. You know what happened?
Yeah.
They kind of like making a weird deal about it. But like, I think he got injured. You know, they didn't like that. But I think if he's injured, I think he might have made the smart move for himself. Probably the UFC didn't like it too much. They probably just wanted to go in there and fight.
Tyron Woodley also chimed in on the subject. He believes that Topuria would easily beat Pimblett if they ever fought. In his view, Topuria's striking and composure make him nearly untouchable at lightweight right now. Woodley doesn't see anyone in the division, not even Islam Makhachev or Justin Gaethje, posing a serious threat to Topuria. But interestingly, he doesn't think it would be a total loss for Pimblett to take that fight. He said, Ilia is just the perfect striker. For Paddy, it's one of those win-win situations for him. If he goes in there and beats him, his brand rockets. If he goes there and loses, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think he's gonna beat him. The only way he would beat him is if he gets in Ilia's head and mentally gets him distracted from competing to the point Ilia wants to just fight him. But Ilia's not shown me so far that people are able to get into his head. Sean O'Malley has a completely different take. The bantamweight title holder sees Topuria versus Pimblett as the perfect fight to make next. In his opinion, it's a matchup that practically sells itself. O'Malley is known for understanding the entertainment side of the MMA, and from his perspective, the build-up to a fight like that would be nothing short of electric. He believes fans would get an incredible press conference, wild trash talk, and a massive pay-per-view event that would captivate both casual viewers and hardcore fans. O'Malley's enthusiasm also comes from knowing how much history exists between the two fighters. Their feud started years ago when Pimblett made comments about Topuria's countrymen, which led to a physical confrontation at a fighter hotel in London.
Ilia Topuria, is he running from Arman?
Ilia's such a massive superstar right now. It's why fight Arman when you could fight Islam or Gaethje's a bigger fight than Arman. Paddy's a bigger fight, so hard to picture anybody beat Ilia right now. Arman definitely has a chance. But why risk it against someone that's not super popular, who's very dangerous?
It's easy to see why this debate has split the MMA world. On one side, there are the purists, fighters and fans who want to see rankings and merit determine who gets title shots, and on the other hand, there are those who recognize that the UFC is also a business, and fights like Topuria versus Pimblett simply make too much financial sense to ignore. The truth is, both sides have a point. The sport thrives in competition, but it also survives in spectacle. Right now, Ilia Topuria stands as the undefeated champion with a target on his back, and the list of potential challengers has never been more intriguing. Arman Tsarukyan is ready to prove he's the rightful number one. Justin Gaethje is waiting for one last big shot, and Paddy Pimblett, whether people like it or not, might be the next in line simply because his name sells. No matter what happens, the next few months in the UFC lightweight division promise to be explosive. Whether it's the rightful contender getting his chance or the fan favorite taking the fast track, one thing's for sure, everyone will be watching.